Hello everyone and welcome back to my FI Crusade, the channel dedicated to sharing the tools, tips, and tricks needed to help you gain financial independence, even starting later in life like me. I'm your host, the FI Crusader, and today we're going to be talking about the most important thing you need in your FIRE Toolkit. So stick around and we'll discuss why budgeting is so important to achieve financial independence and why the amount you make doesn't matter. I've mentioned before that budgets are like bonsai trees, so let's talk about how to build a budget and how to prune it to grow your net worth. Now, step number one for building a budget is track your spending. The first thing you need to do is track every dollar you're spending, no matter where it's going. Now, you might say that that sounds backwards because isn't budgeting all about limiting your spending in the first place? Well, yes it is, but unless you know where your essential expenses are, you can't possibly build a valid budget. So you want to start the process by figuring out where your money is going each month. The great thing about the internet is that there are tons of free tools for tracking spending that'll help you. They'll help you build a budget, and most importantly, because most people are spending their money through the use of credit cards and debit cards, it's relatively easy with these tools to get a good year's worth of detail on your spending habits. Now, two of the most used tools for tracking spending are Mint and Personal Capital. I've used both of these tools and I'll provide a link to both of them in the description below. I personally favor Personal Capital, but either one will work. The reason that I prefer Personal Capital is that it allows you to add manual accounts for the things that don't allow you to link to them automatically. I have a few loans that I was given through state programs for first-time homebuyer incentives and home improvement loans for increased energy efficiency that use smaller banks who don't connect automatically to Mint or Personal Capital. So I have to track these accounts manually, and only Personal Capital will track these as part of my net worth calculation. Mint only treats them as recurring bills, which doesn't really help you in calculating your net worth. Link all of your accounts to Mint or Personal Capital, and it will automatically pull in your transactions from your account websites. Now, step number two is categorizing your spending. Once you have all of your accounts linked to either Mint or Personal Capital, you're going to want to go back about 6 months and verify all of the transactions are properly categorized. Both of these systems automatically categorize your spending based on what they think that transaction is, but some payments get categorized incorrectly. So you want to verify that these are assigned to the right category, and the reason this is so important is that you'll need to make sure that those charges are assigned to the right category for the next step, which will be determining which charges are essential to living and which are discretionary spending. If some random check you wrote is marked as a car payment instead of a new TV purchase, then that'll throw off your budget completely. Now, once you've got that done, each of those transactions have been categorized in your chosen application, it's time to figure out what's essential and what's discretionary.
Take only what you need to survive.
So step number three, determine your essentials. Start with the things for your household. Your household items might be broken down into your rent or mortgage, your insurance, your cable and internet, your cell phone, utilities like electric, gas, heat if you have it, water bill, maintenance costs on the home. Food should be broken down into your groceries and whether it's restaurants or fast food. And then transportation, broken down into a car payment, gas, maintenance, car insurance, registration, taxes, tolls, all of that stuff. Finally, other bills. These are your high-interest bills, such as credit cards, personal loans, and student loans. The goal with determining your essentials is to figure out what you have to pay for every single month, without fail, before you can even think about saving or spending. Now, step four is pay yourself first. Once you've listed the essential must-pay items, this is where things start to get interesting. I'm a big proponent of paying yourself first. What this means is that after you've listed out all of your essential budgetary items, you should start setting money aside for your retirement savings before thinking about spending anything else. Treat your retirement as a bill you have to pay, so start funding your retirement accounts. Begin with your 401k and make sure that you take advantage of every dollar up to your employer match. If your employer offers an HSA option, max out your HSA. Next, start contributing to an emergency fund. Make sure that you have 3 to 6 months of expenses saved up in a high interest savings account, and then go on to put money into a Roth IRA. On the Roth IRA, you want to put as much money as you can into that, up to the maximum that you're allowed to for each year. For the year 2020, it's $6,000, unless you're over 50, in which case you have a catch-up contribution that you can also apply. I believe it's another $1,000 on top of that. The reason for putting as much money as you can into a Roth IRA is that money is growing tax-free. You're not getting a tax break on it right now, but you don't have to pay any taxes on that money when you take it back out. Once you retire, this is going to be a great way to control your tax bill. So max out your Roth IRA, and if you have money left over after maxing out your Roth IRA, getting the employer match on your 401k, maxing out your HSA, then what you want to do is you want to go back and revisit your 401k. If you have money left over after maxing your HSA and your Roth and building on your emergency fund, then start increasing the amount of money that you're contributing to your 401k. Once you have your 401k maxed, which is a much higher $19,500 for 2020, then you'll have probably no money left over. But here's the key. If you do have money left over, don't spend that money. Put it in a brokerage account. You can open a brokerage account with Fidelity or Charles Schwab or Vanguard, whatever your preferred brokerage is. But I like Fidelity because they have a lot of zero-fee index funds that they have offered. So that's what I use. And your final step, discretionary spending. That's step number 5. Discretionary spending is where your money disappears and you're not sure where it's gone. When you come to the end of the month and you're wondering, what happened to my paycheck? Well, this is where it went. Your bills are very highly visible to you. You know what your rent costs, you know what your electric bill costs. What you don't know is how much it costs you to pick up those coffees at insert coffee shop here every morning on the way to work. You don't know how much those $2 purchases at the gas station or the pharmacy add up to. Well, after paying yourself first and your essential bills, you might have money left over. And this is what I like to call lazy money. Some people like to call this fun money, but I think of it as lazy because it's not really doing any job for you. It's not helping you become more financially independent or getting you closer to retirement. It isn't doing anything at all. So fun money implies that you can spend it however you want, and that is exactly what most people do, and why they never have any money left over to save at the end of the month. To me, the money is lazy, needs to get a job. Well, you might see this as higher spending in the restaurant category, or $50 haircuts when a $20 haircut would do fine. Money spent out on the bar every weekend, or if you're splurging on coffee every day, when you could just brew some at home for a fraction of the price. Or better yet, use the coffee maker at work for free. Well, that's one of the ways you're losing your money. Lazy money should eventually be shunted as much as possible into the pay yourself first part of the budget, but at the start of the process, you're going to have to track this money down. You're going to have to figure out where it's going. The ideal, though, is that you'll start to prune the discretionary spending category and move that money that you find into savings categories, like your 401k or your Roth or your emergency fund. And this is where pruning your bonsai to make it grow the way that you want it to grow will really shine. So you eventually end up with a beautiful retirement fund that brings you happiness. Now, I can fully understand that there are some things that you're just going to have to spend on. Clothing gets worn out, you have to do some maintenance on your car or on your house, you have to replace things that break. That's fine. That's essential, and that should be counted in your essential purchases. But this stuff is just discretionary. This is the stuff that you're spending on things that you don't really need, but you've gotten used to. That's lifestyle inflation. So this is the stuff that we want to kind of figure out work on to try to reduce the amount of money that's being spent so that it can then be saved. Finally, I promise to tell you why it doesn't matter what your income level is. Well, let's just be honest. Everybody thinks, well, I don't have money to save because I don't make enough. Well, that's not true. The truth is that you don't make it a priority to save that money. If somebody is making $20,000 a year, and they're capable of living on that $20,000 a year, then it will take them the same amount of time if they save 5% of their salary as someone who's making $150,000 a year if they're saving 5%. And the reason for this is because what your FIRE number is based off of your expenses. If your expenses are high, it's going to take you a lot more money to get there. If your expenses are low, it takes you a lot less time to get there. And if your expenses are the same percentage of your current salary, whether you're making $20,000 a year, $50,000 a year, $120,000 a year, it doesn't matter. If you're spending 80% of your income and you're saving only 20%, it's going to take you the same amount of time, no matter what your salary is, to get to financial independence. So the key here is to look at the actual numbers. Well, so what are those numbers? So what is this chart showing us? Well, it's showing us the number of years that it would take to retire if you put your money into a high interest savings account at 2% versus a investment into something like the S&P 500 index, which annualized rate of return has been about 7.5%. What this shows us is that if we're saving 1% of our salary, then it would take us 198 years to save enough to make back our entire salary as passive income. You would never retire, is basically what that's saying. Even in the S&P 500, if you're only saving 1%, it would take you 72 years at 1% savings rate in order to be able to replace your salary through passive income. Now, the average life expectancy, as you can see, doesn't change on any of these percentages. It's always 78.7, which is what the US average life expectancy is. And in order to be able to actually sustain a real chance of being able to save enough to retire at a decent age, you're looking at saving at least 10% of your income. At 10%, put it into a savings account, it would still take you 86 years. However, if you take that same 10% and you invest it, that money can be enough to support you after 39.9 years. Now, once you get into the higher percentages, you start to see much better returns. Now, obviously, it's got a diminishing returns curve on it, so it's a lot more impactful for you to save 10% versus 1% or 15% over 10% than it is to save 75% over 70%. But that being said, you can see the time differences here. Increasing your savings from 5% to 10% will save you 10 years. You can retire 10 years earlier on 5% extra. Another 5% after that, you're saving an additional 6 years. So going from 5 to 15%, that's 16 years saved off of the time that it's going to take you to retire. Now, if we take that same detail and we put it into a chart, that's when things get very interesting. So here's that same information shown to you as a chart. Now you can see at the bottom here, this is your savings rate. And on the left-hand side here, this is how long it takes you to retire, to completely replace your salary with a passive income. Now, you can see that at 0%, you're not going to retire. At 1%, you start to get in there. You start to be able to retire once you start to invest, but you're still not going to be retiring if you're just throwing things into a savings account. Now, you don't actually get to the point where you have a chance of retiring on just throwing things into savings until you hit that 15 to 20% sweet spot. And that you can see here, 67.9 years to 55.5 years. If you're going to be spending that much time, why not invest it? There's no conceivable reason that you shouldn't invest that money, given the fact that on an annualized rate over the last 50 years, the S&P 500 has just kept going up. Yes, there have been times where the S&P 500, the Dow, both dropped. You saw that in 2008, saw that again at the end of 2018. But every time that it drops, it rebounds. It gets back. And from what we've seen, it doesn't take more than 2 years generally for that to happen. So if you're going to be saving over a time horizon of 10, 20, 30 years, it just makes sense to invest. And if you're looking at this, you can realize that right about here in the 30% range, that's when you start to hit that 25-year sweet spot. Now, I've mentioned before, my FIRE Crusade it comes about because I'm 40 years old and I'm just starting to save for retirement. Well, 30% is that sweet spot. At 30%, you're able to retire in 23.3 years. That's the number that I need. In order for me to retire by the time I turn 65, I need to have at least 30% of my income being saved. And I have actually currently managed to get it almost to the 40% mark. So it's definitely possible. You just have to look and be willing to do it. And that's the real key here. Bring to the table the willingness to figure it out. If you can't find the will to figure out how you can make it happen, then nothing I can share with you is going to help you retire. If you like this video, please click the like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you get informed when I put out new videos. It helps with the YouTube algorithm and it makes my videos more visible so more people get to see and benefit from the information that I've learned, and I can start helping more people to get to where they need to be for retirement. Thank you all for joining me for another installment of my FIRE Crusade, and I'll see you next time.